This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
City Council, Medicaid expansion, and the top stories of the week. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by a roundtable of journalists, starting with Andrew Douglas from Action News 5. Thanks for being here.
All right, good to be here.
Jackson Baker from the Memphis Flyer. Thanks for being here. Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. And Les Smith, Fox 13 News. And so Les, I'll start with you with the doings at the City Council. There's some intrigue, there's some frustration, and there's some work that's got to get done. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of frustration there. Obviously, the chasm between Mayor A.C. Wharton and the Memphis City Council has never been greater during his 5-year period of time. But there's also an opening that has arisen in the District 7 seat. I wanted to talk about that a little bit because it's interesting, very interesting. But it starts with kind of a blast from Christmas past, many Christmas pasts actually, with Barbara Swearingen Ware, who, if you may remember, in 2010 ended up being charged with misconduct in office because she decided that she had been having this practice of paying Shelby County clerk employees money, a little $5 here, $10 here. This was back in the day when, of course, you had to go get your cars inspected. And so rather than stand in long lines, she thought it would be better if she could just give a little money here, and then they would go out and get licenses for her and her relatives as well. Well, Bill Gibbons at the time comes down, charges her with this. She ends up taking a plea deal and diversion. But immediately after taking that plea deal, she comes out and she says, but I'm still innocent. Well, that has festered in her since that time. And now, this past week, she had filed for the now vacated District 7 seat because Lee Harris has become a state senator. And she is one of 7 candidates, at least we think 7 candidates by the time that it's over, right, who will vie to get back her old seat, which she held for 16 and a half years previously.
And another one is Brian Carson, the head of the local Democratic Party.
He was the second one who qualified, seemed to qualify on the front end.
Mm-hmm. And are they the two serious ones, or is that being unfair?
No, they're the ones who had 25 signatures as of last Thursday.
Okay.
And that was originally interpreted, I guess, by Myron, who did that, Myron Lowry, who originally interpreted that to be the deadline for successful petitions. Yeah. Now, they didn't have to have petitions in the first place by the Election Commission. That is a city charter requirement.
Yeah.
But everybody had 23 or 24 except for those 2. And they thought they had gotten in under the transom. It was going to be down to those 2. And I tell you, the dismay on the council and in the population at large thinking those are our choices was enormous.
But there are 5 or 6 others. Is that correct?
There are 5 or 6 others, including Berlin Boyd, who served on the council before on an interim basis. In fact, he was who the council had appointed when Ware left the council. They appointed him on an interim basis.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, well, and here's an opportunity for the public to be informed about it. The electorate to say, okay, I'm going to do a few minutes of work here and figure out, is Barbara Swearingen Ware deserved to be back on the council at 75 years old, having served, 16, 17 years? Or should I go in another direction? Because voters want what they want a representative to reflect their opinions, their thoughts, their political views.
Right.
So take a few minutes. A better informed electorate is going to produce a better candidate.
Well, and District 7 seat is key. It's a key seat and a key vote.
It covers what area?
Well, it covers everything from downtown,
Mud Island area,
Fraser.
Right.
I mean, it is wide and huge.
And these people, even though it's a
White
special,
Haven.
let's go to the logistics real quickly. How will they get selected?
They will be appointed by the remaining 12 city council members who are to vote at their January 20th meeting. They serve roughly the year that is remaining on Lee Harris's term of office, because we'll have city elections in October for everyone
really
on the
less
city
than a year,
council.
though.
Right.
A little less than a year. And it needs 7 votes, 7 of the 12.
Yeah.
Simple
It
majority.
takes 7 of the 12, and there are some council members who will be inclined to support Barbara Ware. She was a very influential council member when she held that seat
Right.
before. But all of these council members, with the exception of Lee Harris, had the onerous duty of deciding what to do with Barbara Ware after she was indicted and when she refused to resign during that interim period between her suspension on the council and her indictment. And most of the council members didn't particularly enjoy having to be part of that public spectacle. And I think that's going to be a big factor.
Jackson.
Yeah, I did mean to suggest, by the way, that those two people caused all that dismay. In some circles they did, but basically just people didn't want their choices restricted. Alan Wade is a hero of the peace, the council attorney, because he gave the correct interpretation, I presume, of what the charter says, and he said, guess what, you got till Thursday the 15th, which means everybody can get in under the gate.
Right.
And you will have that wider choice than the two that seem to be the choice. Berlin Boyd, by the way, Bill mentioned, has, I think, been the front runner up to this point.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, he'd already served one term as an interim councilman.
During
Did
his
well.
interim was about 5 or 6 months, and he did an outstanding job.
Yeah.
Things are a little bit different, though, because when he served before, he served saying he did not want to run for a full term on the council.
Okay.
This time, he does intend to run for a full term on the council. So the council has to make what's a pretty common decision before they pick a person. They have to decide, do we want to pick someone who will only serve for this short amount of time, or do we want to give someone an advantage who's going to run in October?
And meanwhile, in just a couple of seconds left talking about the city council, there are some big things going on. One is the mediation and the possible settlement with the schools. Maybe Bill, update us on that.
Well, Mayor Wharton thought that he had a settlement worked out with Shelby County School Superintendent Dorsey Hobson, and the county school board actually approved that settlement. The city council ignored the proposal, which was done outside of the mediation process that they favor, and simply continued mediation. There's another session coming up later this month into next month on that. So still no settlement of the school's funding question.
And then you have this weird, I just have to do this because we haven't talked about it on the show, the weird thing with Strickland and Lowry at Lowry's. This is the first show we've done since. You want to take that, Jackson?
Yeah.
It was a really strange moment.
It's one of those things that was happening, and you were watching it happen, you think this can't be really going on.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. Myron Lowry asked Jim Strickland, first of all, he'd asked him to sit at the same table as the mayor, who he intends to run against if things work out. And that was awkward in itself. But then he asked Jim Strickland to stand very late in the proceedings. He starts bragging on Strickland. And Jim is basking in this. Okay, fine, thank you. It's beginning to sound like he's going to endorse him. And then suddenly he says, you're going to make a fine mayor someday, but not yet.
Yeah.
And then he starts endorsing the mayor. And
As
Strickland's
Jim
still
Strickland is still
standing
standing.
at attention. And, his face turning red. He finally just walked out in the middle of what Myron was saying.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's the most awkward thing I've ever seen. First of all, it's a prayer breakfast. Why endorse anybody? But if you're going to do it, don't have one of the opponents stand up and have to listen to this like that.
And that can't help interpersonal, interfactional things
Yeah,
within
how
the
are you
city
going to do
council.
that? Because moments before this happened, I interviewed Myron, and he was talking about how he's going to bring the council together as the chairman for a record 5th time.
Right.
And then he goes out and he stabs Strickland in the back.
Well,
last time from
and so with this friction on the board, perhaps that District 7, that new representative, can bring some closure, can kind of bring everybody together. There's a lot of issues they have to discuss. They have to discuss the budget. They have to discuss the schools. There's always going to be a lot of contentious
I love that we have
issues.
another naive optimist on the table with me, because these guys are over here laughing at us.
That's why I'm hoping the electorate becomes more educated about who's running and pick someone that represents their political views.
Okay, well, we'll stay with you and talk about some trouble within, I don't know if I should say within, but with Amy Wyrick and the district attorney's office in a pretty high-profile case.
Sure.
What's going on there?
Okay, so Nora Jackson's been in the headlines for about 10 years now. This woman was accused back in 2005. She was 18 at the time, accused of killing her mother in her East Memphis home. Her mother was found stabbed more than 50 times. She went to trial in 2009, was convicted. This past summer, the state Supreme Court reversed that conviction and ordered a new trial. Now, what came out from that state Supreme Court ruling was a couple of things. One, that they had issue with some of the things that Amy Wyrick did. Amy Wyrick, the lead prosecutor in this case.
Prior to her becoming the
District Attorney General.
Okay.
Right. So they said, for one, we don't like how in her closing argument she said something to the effect of, Nora, why don't you just tell us where you were at the time? Well, that goes against her constitutional right to remain silent during her defense and during her trial. And then the second thing was, apparently there was this issue of her withholding witness evidence from the defense, which could have cast some doubt into where she was. Right. And so all of this came out because the prosecution's case was, for a large part, circumstantial. There were some behavioral issues that they talked about, a cut on her hand. And so now Amy Wyrick has removed herself from the murder case. She still wants her office to be a part of it. The defense is taking it one step further, saying, hey, well, look, we don't want any prosecutor from Shelby County. Yeah. We don't want jurors from Shelby County. We want people from the outside to try this. A judge is expected to make a ruling next month.
And they're, in fact, saying that her attorneys are saying, look, she's an innocent woman in jail. She should be why isn't she being released? She should be out on bond at least before the free. And I guess there's some argument to that. I mean, it's probably a very frustrating, or depending on your point of view, embarrassing moment for Amy Wyrick.
It could be, and one of the things that could be even more embarrassing is that Valerie Corder, who is one of the counsel for the defense for Nora, may very well call Amy Wyrick to the stand. That's a possibility, to embarrass her and make her talk about this evidence that was withheld. That's the last thing Ms. Wyrick wants.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
It was a pretty interesting ruling when it came down from the Tennessee Supreme Court. Let's also remember that when someone is in the position of District Attorney General, it's a pretty rare thing for them to try a case from that elected position. Usually it is the Assistant District Attorney General who end up trying those cases. The witness statement that the court ruled on also dealt with someone that the defense might very well point to as a possible suspect other than Nora Jackson in this homicide.
You know, and this is not, within the last year or so, this is like the fourth or fifth case that has come bouncing back to the district attorney's office due to some improprieties or irregularities as spotted by the Supreme Court. Yeah. And these have been high-profile murder cases that are now going to be back on the retrial track again.
And this is a tough case because there's no physical evidence linking her to the crime. A lot of it was circumstantial. There was some behavioral issues that the prosecution used, and some sort of cut on her hand, inconsistencies made to the police. So this is a very hard case to try. That new trial should be very interesting to see how that prosecution team goes after it.
We said in a month or so, is that what?
Well, a month is going to determine whether the judge will say, are we getting people from outside of Shelby County or not?
Okay, last word on this. Okay.
But mine is I agree with Andrew. This is going to be a sensational trial. If you thought the first one was good, the second one's going to be better.
Okay. Let's move to the legislature, Jackson, and the first order of business is Medicaid expansion, something that Republicans thought would never happen. It is an outgrowth of Obamacare, of the Affordable Care Act. Most Republican governors, most dominant Republican states like Tennessee, most in the South, have not moved forward with the Medicaid expansion. But some days, if I'm not mistaken, after Bill Haslam won his primary battle, he said, you know what, we're pretty close, and we think we can get a alternative version of Medicaid expansion done. They're going to take it up here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it was kind of a huge surprise because he had talked about when he had a press conference in early 2013 saying that we were not going to, the state was not going to undergo Medicaid expansion through the Affordable Care Act. He said, I'm working on the Tennessee plan. And the next year, people kept trying to find out what the Tennessee plan was. And at a certain point, people decided it's a phantom, it doesn't exist. So it was a huge surprise when he actually shows up with a Tennessee plan called Insure Tennessee, which actually seems like a pretty decent plan because it does cater to the ideology of the marketplace. At the same time, it involves itself fully with the Affordable Care Act. They had the same problem, the legislature has the same problem with the health care issue as it does with educational standards. Yeah. They're trying to get some version of the Medicaid expansion under ACA without calling it that. They're trying to get some version of educational standards without calling it Common Core. Those are two things that are going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But Ron Ramsey, the Speaker of the Senate and Lieutenant Governor, who basically commands the conservative wing of the Republican Party, except for some of the Tea Party elements that are beyond his control. He said he was open-minded toward this plan, which is, you know, a fairly.
But some time ago, he had said, "I don't even know why the Haslam administration is bothering to talk to the Obama administration to try and get this waiver, to try to do Medicaid expansion a different way."
Because a waste of time.
A waste of time. Thank you. Because it's just toxic for Republicans and Republicans running for election to have any kind of association with Obamacare, right?
But the Chamber of Commerce, the State Chamber of Commerce, the Tennessee Hospital Association,
Right.
very influential people have been just demanding, because the hospitals are going broke.
Right.
So, but I went to a meeting last week of Shelby County Republican legislators, and they are not as open-minded as Ramsey is to this idea. They were still condemning it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be touch and go.
Let's go through some of the substance of the plan, so advocates, and these are advocates, say it could create 15,000 jobs and bring $1.1 billion in new spending. They've harped on that. There's this, quote, free money. It is 100% funded by the U.S. government. It's out there waiting for any state who wants to take advantage of it. That would fuel jobs. It would support the hospitals who right now, you know, it's right here, $1.4 billion a year that Tennessee hospitals in services they provide that go unreimbursed. People who don't have insurance, who don't have the means. Most of the people who are, they're talking about 200 to 470,000 people who could participate. So it's a huge number of people. Most of them, 54% of those people, are working. It's not, you know, sometimes the people who are going to be eligible for Medicaid are painted as, you know, no good, lazy, shiftless, da-da-da-da-da. There are people who work in jobs that don't provide insurance. A couple other substantive things. The people eligible, 138% of the poverty line. So anyone basically under $22,000, so a single person. And part of what's interesting about this, it does do a voucher, a more Republican program that you can take the voucher from the state and use it for your employer insurance. Let's say you just couldn't afford that. It also takes the Tennessee Hospital Association came forward and said, look, if there's a gap, and there will be at some point as the federal money decreases, the federal money decreases, we, the Tennessee hospitals, will cover that gap, which, you know, you do the math, they're already out $1.4 billion, so they're coming out ahead. But their pressure on this was huge, Bill.
Right, and the THA stepping up on this for the gap was one of the keys to it. The other is that the governor is going to emphasize that this also deals with the working poor.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a big selling point on this beyond the legislature. Something very interesting happened at the Shelby County Commission this week in this regard. Terry Rowland, if not the most conservative Shelby County Commissioner, certainly the most vocal conservative Shelby County Commissioner, sponsored a resolution that the commission passed 12-0, urging the Tennessee legislature to approve the Insure Tennessee plan.
It's a non-binding, but it's a vote of some.
It shows the Shelby County Commission's state of mind on this particular thing. A body that has certainly had its partisan divide in the past.
It's a signature legislation for Bill Haslam.
Sure.
A guy who has enjoyed tremendous popularity in the state, 60-70%. But yet, you, me, we've all done it. It said, where's his backbone? Where's his spine?
Mr. Vanilla.
Yeah. Well, this is it. This is where he comes in. This is where he has to bring together not only the Republican, a certain amount of Republican support, but he's got to get a lot of Democratic support in both the House and the Senate.
And he has called for Democratic support explicitly. He says, I cannot pass this without you.
Right.
Yeah.
He's going to get all the Democrats.
Are there any Democrats up there? No, there are.
Very few.
Very few.
How many fingers do I have?
One of the objections.
But that speaks to how close it's going to be, because there are just certain Republicans, on principle and on politics, are not going to.
One of the ingenious features of the Haslam plan is this. One of the complaints of the critics has been, look, after 2 years, the government says it's going to still pay 90%. I bet they'll default. Well, I'm not sure when the government's ever defaulted or anything like that, but and the hospital association has volunteered to pay the remainder.
Right.
So really,
Where's the
took
risk? Where's the downside?
that argument out of the way. They're still making that argument, though. But Haslam's plan has a condition. If these conditions don't come through, these monies don't come through, the plan automatically discontinues.
Yeah. Just to repeat that, if for some reason the hospitals say, well, we're not doing that, we're not covering
Or
that
the
gap,
feds default.
or the federal government says we're changing the law and we're not going to fund that, Insure Tennessee goes away, which brings up memories, and this is an argument that Brian Kelsey has made, the conservative senator from Germantown, that look, we went through a reduction of the rolls with TennCare, and it was painful. And it was frustrating.
Crocodile tears.
I'm trying to be
I know,
fair to the other point of view that we don't want to go through that again. The Tennessee has gone through that. They ran up the rolls and then had to cut them. They don't want to go through it again.
Right. So I was just going to say, in addition to the jobs that, there would be some creation there and the hospitals being supported of it, Mayor Wharton has said, hey, look, this will cover 67,000 or so, give or take, uninsured in Shelby County and about 200,000 uninsured in Tennessee.
Yeah, the Med, for instance, this is back to the other numbers I was talking about. In 2012, they had $147 million in unreimbursed services.
Right.
It's a huge number.
Huge number.
You had Coopwood, you had Gary Shorb from Methodist, you had all the hospital executives in the country saying, look, we are required by law to care for these people if they come in the emergency room. Businesses in the state are paying these taxes, these ACA penalty taxes. This is kind of a no-brainer. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Let's stay with the legislature and Les, the constitutional amendment that passed in the fall elections and changes to abortion legislation are on the horizon.
Yes, they are, and the bills are piling up already as to regulations that they want to impose. A couple of the legislative pieces that are waiting to be looked at. One would involve that someone who's going to get an abortion has to wait 24 to 48 hours before going through with an operation. Also, the fact that they want to do counseling before all of this. They also want to be able to inspect the places where abortions are going to be taking place in terms of medical inspections and that type of thing like that. Those bills are already there, just waiting.
Is the bill that other states have done that require doctors working in an abortion clinic or a clinic that provides abortion have to have admitting rights in neighboring hospitals? Has that come forward? Do you know?
As far as I know, I don't know
because
if it's
that's
come
the one that
forward yet,
in Mississippi they essentially shut down all but I think one clinic. It's been shut. That bill, it's kind of model legislation for people who believe strongly about this. So it shuts down clinics that provide abortions because those doctors are unable, unwilling, whatever, to get the admitting privileges at nearby hospitals. And so that's been talked about that may come up, and that's one that the abortion rights people are going to fight tooth and nail, I assume, because they've seen what happens in other states.
That's right. We've already seen a demonstration as in Nashville of those who have been proponents of Amendment 1. 1,700 of them came from Memphis and went to Nashville to be part of that rally.
Well, it is interesting,
yesterday.
if I'm not mistaken, then we'll move on. I mean, in city of Memphis or Shelby County, and I think in Davidson County, in the cities in Tennessee, and I'm just looking at you, Bill, maybe unfairly, this bill was opposed. This constitutional amendment was opposed. It was more the rural parts of Tennessee, which have their fair share and fair vote in the legislature, who were in favor of it. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, it's definitely a rural-urban divide on this particular issue. The Amendment 1 failed to carry Shelby County in the November election.
Right. Let's move on. Just a few minutes left. Some big economic development news. The Tennessee Brewery, which has been kind of an eyesore downtown and a place of promise and has been talked about for I don't even know how many decades. It's sat empty and people have talked about some kind of redevelopment. It's going to happen, Bill. What's the plan there for downtown?
It's going to take a lot of luck and hard work for it to happen, but there is a plan, a specific plan for it to be residential units, apartments by the group that now owns that particular building. Interesting plan because we've seen plans before for residential condos or apartments within the old brewery building. This particular plan has some freestanding new buildings that will be next to it, and one of those freestanding buildings, the apartment units in it, as I understand it, will actually subsidize what's going on in the brewery by virtue of having a new building with new units in it. That particular development, we've seen numerous plans over decades to bring the brewery back. It's massively expensive to pull off residential in that particular building, given its old structure, and financing for condos is very difficult. That's why you're looking at apartment units.
But we've had people on the show, we've had people on seminars we've done in the paper and covering commercial real estate who said, kind of as fast as they can build apartments, high-end apartments downtown, they rent them out, and there's a huge amount of growth going on there. Billy Orgel, who's, I would say, the lead person in this proposal with the Tennessee Brewery, I mean, I don't have the exact quote, but said, look, if you're just trying to make money, you're going to build a strip center out east. That's how you make money.
Right.
On this, I mean, they're trying to make money, but they're going to the Center City, what used to be called Center City Revenue or Center City Commission, for some funding. I mean, there's going to be some pilots. There's going to be some incentives to make this happen, which of course gets into a certain amount of controversy.
But if you look at what is going on the development on the south end, you're right. The demand for apartments is there downtown, and particularly on the south end. And what this is another indication that development is very close to jumping Crump Boulevard and going into South Memphis proper.
Right. Just another economic. Some bad news was Macy's is leaving. Has announced it's going to close in the Southbrook Mall, which is kind of odd.
Southland.
Southland. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Sorry, Southland. Don't quote me on that. It's near Graceland, where all that money's going in. I mean, so I don't know. Thoughts on there's good news, there's bad news.
Well, you know, it's a retail store, a retail chain. They make they look at their profits, they look at their deficits, they make their own decisions.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard for any city to be any more than a spectator. I mean, you go there, you buy. And that's it. It's not like a pilot program where we can try to salvage them and save them. So,
but the timing for this realignment by Macy's could not have been worse. You have over $100 million in development happening connected to Graceland's 120-acre campus. You have $43 million in streetscape improvements on Elvis Presley Boulevard, several million connected to other projects in this particular area, and Macy's decides to realign. And more importantly, drop this on city leaders apparently completely ignorant of that and with no notice to them at all.
10 seconds.
And it's not like Raleigh Springs Mall, which went south in a hurry. This mall can be redeemed.
Although it is interesting, New York Times did a great story recently on the death of malls nationally, and high-end malls are working nationally, but mid-tier and lower malls are not working, and it's a really interesting, regardless of the. No, we're done. Sorry, cut everybody off. Join us again next week. Thanks for being here. Thank you guys. Good night.